from this to this. Yeah. How do I do it? How do you get lights in here? Let's see. Yes, it's a very exciting day in Expedition Camper building and my DIY Expedition Camper. This is video series number 101, and this is a pretty challenging and big momentous day, and now we have to go and drill into the ceiling of this composite camper and pull wire through the channels that are in that ceiling that are no longer exposed on the ends to be able to pull the wire through and connect up to all the lights in the ceiling. But it makes a completely transformative experience in this DIY Expedition Camper. So hang with me and I'll show you the tips on how to mark out those holes, pull the wire, and get it done. And it all starts with this blue painter's tape marking out the wire chases in the roof panel where I'm going to install the ceiling lights. And this allows me to get rid of the holiday lights, as you'll see here with my electric bed, moving them out of the way. Pushing those lights out of the way. We'll start over here in the corner. Although there is another option, it could be pulled out inside of that cabinet and just brought over. That makes you maybe even easier. Shorten the wire run significantly, since that's where the switch is going to be. So it all starts with a plan. Of course, a plan where all the lights are going to go, and of course where the wiring is going to go, your switches are going to be, and so you have all the right pathways for the wiring that you're going to pull, and this lights installed in the right places, and then start drilling. Trying to just make sure it didn't go through the ceiling, but I'm sure it would have hit something more if that happened, right?
Oh yeah, you would. I mean, the ceiling's 4 inches or 3.5 or whatever it is. So.
Fortunately, I did not drill through the roof panel, although at one point I thought I did, and I did not even drill through the wiring chase channel, even though it's only about 1 inch tall. The more challenging part here is getting the alignment to exactly where those channels are, because they're only about 3/8 of 1 inch thick or wide. So the opening is very tiny, and yet you need a pretty wide bit in order to make sure you get the wiring in there and fit that in. So you can see here in this panel, those little wiring chases are really pretty small, both in their height and their width. So that's the biggest challenge. But then once you get all the holes drilled, it's just a matter of now pulling wire. And this is not quite as easy as it seems, because again, these holes are fairly small that you're drilling into the ceiling. You don't want to make too big of holes for one, to get like condensation or any air transfer in there, and also just to maintain, the structural integrity, of course, of the ceiling, and make sure those holes are rather small. But you want to just have them big enough to be able to pull the wire through, and so that means lots of little wire pull tapes and no real wire or cable pull wire. It just is really difficult to get in there at the ends, or they can get stuck in there if you're not careful. So you have to just use some really little fiberglass pull wire. That's what I used, and that worked really well. And sometimes even just the wire itself, and just pulling it from one to the next hole, as all these are interconnected in series. It helps so much if you can have a helper helping to pull that wire as you're pushing it through, and I was so fortunate to have my friend John helping me out.
Go back toward you. Pull back toward you. Right, stop.
And once all that wire is pulled, this is what it looks like. Pretty much a bunch of wire hanging from the ceiling out of a bunch of holes. And now it's time to go and start to cut this wire and connect the lights themselves to it, and then screw those up onto the ceiling, while, of course, before doing all that, removing the tape. So here we go. Let's get into that. All right, now that I have all these wires run right here for all my lights in the ceiling, I'm really excited about that. It was difficult to pull those through, as you saw, but I'm going to try to run one more wire all the way down the full length to that skylight right there. I'm going to run this one more wire so that way I can know if the skylight's open or closed. Do the same thing for the front one here, but the front one's going to be a really short little run, so that should be fairly easy. But the rear one's a long run. I'm going to try to push it through with just a straight right here, 20 gauge 3-wire, but it's already in a nice round sheath, so it should be pretty easy to push through. I'm hoping it'll go all the way down. Let's give it a try and see. Okay, that didn't work. No matter what I did to try, you can see how much I'm pulling out, a fair amount, enough that probably wouldn't have made it, but pretty close. You can see that this wire has a curve in it, natural bend. I'm using that bend to go right down here, so that way it just follows along the top of this wire, hopefully all the way down. This wire is coming out this way, so I just have that one wire. Because this channel, as you might be able to see right here, is so tall that this should have plenty of room to get in there and just keep pushing back, but also has enough room to curl around itself, which is probably what happened. And somewhere around close, not quite to the midway point here, I believe that there is a seam, fiberglass rectangular tube, this wire conduit that's inside of the ceiling here. I believe that there's a seam here because there's a little gap because we're pushing that wire through. It was the only wire that we had that same problem with, where we get bound up at that same spot every time, and we had a hard time getting it through, even also with the fish tape. So I think it's the same thing. I'm going to try pushing it through from the other side and hope that maybe that resolves it and I get through it. It's going to be difficult to pull it out here to get it understood where that space and time is, and hopefully it pops out, but it's unlikely. It could keep going through, but I'm going to give that a try and see, and I'm just going to measure out my distance so that way, you know, I'll know if I'm too far or hopefully close enough. Let's go give it a try. So again, I'm going to work with this bend, and not just am I going to work with this bend going right down the top of this here, and hopefully it stays on top of this flat wire that's here, but I'm going to keep it oriented that same direction. So the hope is that that bend doesn't then push into this channel where I believe there's a little gap or just a seam where the wires have been getting caught up on. So I'm keeping this going the same direction. I have basically a rough gauge of how much wire I have out, and I'm feeling and I'm listening as I push it down. I'm feeling to make sure it doesn't seem to get bound up. There's not sex resistance or like a quick little stop before it releases because it got caught up somewhere. And also I'm listening as it goes down, just see if I can hear any change in how it sounds as it goes down. So I'm being quiet while I'm pushing this. And now I've hit something. But interesting enough is I saw the wire in the other end move. I think I'm maybe all the way down at the end by both the distance that the wire has been spooled out and also because the other wire moved. So if I look up in that hole there, I should see it, and hopefully I can then pull this back a little bit to get to the end and pull it out with some needle nose pliers. So let's go take a look and see. I thought I had it, but obviously I did not. I don't see the wire down there, and I'm definitely bound up here. So what I'm going to do is just try rotating this wire around. Probably won't really rotate all the way down to the end there, but one never knows. It still keeps getting bound up there at something, and I don't see it in that hole with the light, this very small little hole that I have in the little bit of light that's in there. It's like about a 3/8 inch hole. You see that? You probably hear that getting bound up. So I'm going to try a different technique. Instead of having this point down, I'm going to try it pointing up, with the expectation that maybe that seam, by the time it gets down there, that little bent up tip will start folding down and not get caught in that seam, with the rest of the wire rubbing on the bottom up here on this. Feels like we're getting caught up again, but I might be getting a little more out now. And if my estimate there is right, I should be pretty darn close to the end, and I'm seeing the wires at the end move. So I'm going to assume that I must be really close down there. Jammed up again. Well, let's go check it out. Let's see. Okay, let's hope. I do not see a wire up in there at all. Well, I'm going to try once again from this end, and let's see how this end. And here we go. And about another couple minutes later, here we are. Sometimes I try to wiggle a little bit, break it free, pull in the other wire here or push it through. Let's go check the other end. I'm just hoping. Wow, look at that. You can see it right there. Only about an inch back. So I'm going to grab some needle nose pliers. Let's see if we can pull this thing through. Have to do this very carefully because I can barely get the needle nose in that deep. And I don't want to push it back. And oh yeah, it's definitely bound up in there. Here we go. Look at that. See that? I got it. Yahoo! It was really the smallest gauge wire that was thick enough I could get through. It's why I used this 23. It's all I had available. Could I have used a single wire in there? Sure. But an unsheathed single wire would have just folded right up. I know this has got a lot of rigidity to it. And yet it was a small enough gauge, plenty for a pin. But I could tuck it in when I put this frame on. And this one is not for the lights. This one is for the linear actuators that are going to go in there. And the other one over here is actually for the lights. So now I can cut that wire. That's great. It's the last wire I wanted to run. And the reality is I can actually pull this tape off now, which is crazy. Look at all these blue stripes. You guys been looking at these blue stripes through my entire camper build, and I am tired of them myself. It's time to take these things down and move these things out and get some lights installed up in the ceiling. Let's do this. Okay, to make sure I don't forget what these wires are until I get everything installed, I'm just going to write on these what they are. So I'm going to put this just simply painter's tape onto these, and that way you can fold it on all different ways here, but that way just don't forget or lose what all these things are for while everything gets all wrapped up. You know, I thought this was such a good idea to have a position switch on the rear skylight. I'm going to do it in the front as well. I'm more up on the rear because it tilts up sideways, and also because I'm going to have it in motor control, so I can control it up or down, have a little indicator light tell me when it's closed, make sure I have it closed. The front will be manually controlled. No plans for a motor on that. However, I'm going to give it a little pin switch as well, or at least wiring for that. And there's nothing wrong with putting a little extra wire in for something in advance, even if you're not entirely sure you're going to use it. And the reason why is because what if you do need it, whether it's for that intended purpose or another purpose you did not intend it for. So that way you always have a little extra wire somewhere, especially where you can't run it later on. Very difficult to do, so I'm doing it now. Okay, ladies and gents, today is the big day, and it's a big day indeed. Because guess what? For the first time in a year of building this camper, the blue stripes are going to go away. They're going to go away. We're going to get rid of these blue stripes. I mean, I've gotten used to them, you know, like racing stripes, but I don't see any more value or need for them at all. I think it's time to take them down. It's kind of frightening thinking about it. Let's do this. Let's do this. Here we go. I've got wires and holes pulled through. Wire through the hole. I still have a mark of a dry race mark. You can see right here, like that one there, a dry race mark where the light's going to go. Great, I have the wire there, but also some of these dry race marks also have an indicator to tell me which way that light's going to go on that line. Some are centered, some are actually offset from the line. What's really cool about taking these off, all this tape, is not only is it, wow, we're going to see nice white ceiling, to be a little bit lighter in here, a lot prettier, but also because now I can actually clean the whole ceiling up. There's a lot of dust and debris that's built up on the ceiling throughout the camper building every time cutting in a window or some other hole somewhere, and that obviously just all adds up, right? So it'll be really, really great to be able to get the ceiling all cleaned up, all that dust and debris off of it. I noticed some of that coming down as I clean stuff and put holes in things, and so look at that, a lot of tape to finally get rid of. Wow, look at that. Does that already look better or what? It's looking better. Indeed. Let's keep this going. Here we go, one of the last pieces other than what's in the cabinets, and I'm trying to keep a few of those pieces on in the cabinets right now, just in case I need to pop in there from the cabinets for a switch or something that I hadn't thought about, but this is pretty much about the last major piece. There's a few smaller pieces I'm still contemplating whether I remove or not, and it's so great to get these removed. You can tell me I'm consternating quite a bit as removed, because once this is gone, it'll be a lot harder to get exactly where this channel is. What we did, you might notice there's a line drawn on this painter's tape here. So when before we glued up these panels and put them all together, and we had just this panel alone, the roof panel, laid out on some sawhorses, we went ahead and put this tape down right over the middle where we could look right down the end to end, where we could see the wire chase from end to end, and then we took a straight edge from end to end of that wire conduit all the way from end to end, and we took a straight edge right down the middle of it, and then somebody drew this mark on the painter's tape, so we knew we had a dead center where that was. Pretty great way of doing it, and that allowed us to make sure that we really had, you see that right there, that line, I think you can see that. That way we knew exactly where it was, and so when I drilled into these holes, every one popped straight in. And this was a big accomplishment to get every one of these holes drilled straight in. Some I even made a little elongated or slotted, like this one here and a couple of others, just to help get those wires in, particularly where there are some bigger wires. And you can see the fish tape here, and then all the wires coming down before we get the lights hooked up. You see how dark it is in here? It's dark, right? And it's dark because I don't have any ceiling lights hooked up yet. I'm still working on temporary lights. Right here, these are holiday lights that I'm using now to add some more light in here, because otherwise all I have is this big shop light. And you see that? It's going to go right in your eyes. It definitely gives me some good brightness out here, but also creates a lot of shadows. Anytime I'm standing, of course, my back to it, or I'm down in a cubby here, of course this light's not getting in there. So now that I have my wiring pulled through the ceiling for the lights, the ceiling lights, I'm going to try to hook this up now to some temporary power. I'm going to hook these in so I can create this temporary light. And this is one of the challenges really working on any camper van project. I'm very fortunate that I have a garage, and a garage where I added a ton of lights inside the garage. Great for when working outside of the camper, but when inside, you can see it's pretty dark in here. If I turn these off, right, you can see, let's see, turn them all off here. This is how much light comes in right now from just the garage lights. Not much to work on. Let's get these temporary lights hooked up, and this way, the ceiling lights hooked up. This way, as I'm hooking them up, right, I can make sure I know that they're working. So I'll go ahead and each time I cut the wire, I'll make sure the power's off, get that light hooked up, and then as soon as it's hooked up, I'll turn this temporary power on. I'll know that light's working before I go and push all these wires back up into the ceiling, because once I push them on the ceiling, it's going to be hard to fish them back out, if even possible, and screw the lights up in their final place. It's always a bummer to hook up a light and find out it's not working, or you have some wiring issue or something, have to deinstall it. So I want to make sure that's not happening. So this is my process of doing that, and it gave me temporary light from the ceiling while I'm working in here to finish this camper build out. Both my kitchen and my dinette light circuits now connected in this DC power supply right here. So I've got those connected in, and look what we have. We have one ceiling light now operational, ready, so all I gotta do is get this mounted up there after I get the other rest of the lights in this circuit connected. I want to get all the rest of the lights in the circuit connected, of course with the power off. That way I know that every light in there is working well before I go and push all the wire up. So that way, in case I need to pull any more wire out, need a little more one area or not. So I'm gonna get all these connected up. Then I'll have that circuit up and running, which would be great on this temporary DC power supply. That'll give me light while I go ahead and work on the next circuit and the next circuit. So I'll keep adding light, get rid of this temporary light setup, this bright shop light, and of course all these holiday lights all around here, which while they do disperse light all around, which is really great, it's not that much light, as you can tell. It's really dim. So at least it gives me some dispersed light, but these ceiling lights like this one here, they're going to be some really excellent light. You can see how much brighter it is already down here. That light is going to be fantastic for when working in here, especially as I keep adding them. So let's keep doing this. This is great. Hooking up my lights, continue to hook them up here and test them out as I go along. That'll allow me to put both the two wires in there, right, combined together, two of these smaller 18 gauge wires combined together, which basically is going to be the light and or the white light with the wire passing on to the next light, or the light and the wire coming from the power source. And so that way I can still get these heat shrunk down, crimped down, and stuffed up into that hole in there. And they'll be crimped, which will be give that wire a nice tight connection, as well as soldered to make sure I have a really good solid connection as well, since it's going to be buried up in the ceiling here. So that's what I'm going to do now. Once I get these connected up, test it out, then I'll go ahead and make sure all the lights are working. Then I'll go ahead and heat shrink all these down. They're all heat shrink butt connectors. Get these solders on the soldered ones connected up, and then get these lights, once they're all now tested out and running, get these lights up in the ceiling screwed in, and that way I've got good light to move on, because it's getting really hard to see in here, especially these small little, trying to get wire in these small little holes here and stuff with the limited light I have. So this will be great to get this done. So now I'm holding this to the light so I can really see these wires going in there, because it's really hard to get them all lined up in these little tiny holes for these butt connectors. Now I'm holding really my wires, I'm pushing up from the bottom here. So I'm holding that one from the on the coming in from the top, pushed up against the ceiling to have that tension on it, to have it pushed down. Now come back over, double crimp everything all the way up and down, including the middle. So I hopefully have a really good connection there. Give that the good old pull test. And yes, that's a good connection. Now, I'm going to hook this into power. These two lights should come on. That one's not connected up yet. I got to connect up, but these two come on. I've got some more light. I can actually power this while I power the other side up. Let's give this a try. Plugging her in. Oh my gosh, I see light. Yes! Yes, we got light. That's huge. So now that I've got these lights on, that is a massive benefit to helping me see this other side, adding light as I go here. So I'm going to keep these plugged in while I do the other side, and that's because that's going to get another circuit that are unplugged. So I can keep adding light as I go. What I'm going to do too is I'm going to try also just stuffing these up in here. Well, I can't stuff them up past the connectors yet. I've got to heat shrink those. I'm really just trying to see if I can get these lights a little bit higher up to give me a little bit better light where I'm working. And then I'll come back in and heat shrink them all at the same time. Okay, well before I do that then, here's what else I'm going to do. This wire that they provide is pretty rigid, even though it's very fine stranded. The insulation on it's just like you can see, it just really holds its bend, and it's really pretty rigid. Because I'm pushing these up in that channel, I really want to get minimize not just the length of wire, the quantity of wire that's up there, but also this really rigid wire. So it's a little risky because I'm cutting this wire back, and hopefully I still have enough, but I'm cutting it back basically right to where that tab is, this 12 volt tab. I already know what they all are. I know the reds are 12s. But then this way, you can see that wire's still got that bend in it right there, left over from just the crimps pushing through it. So I'll straighten that out, give the wire, strip these wires, right? And then by doing that, now I've cut down the amount of wire that goes up in there, and that way it's a little easier to push up into the ceiling channels. So again, I already got those now stripped, so they're good to go. Now we just have to get this lens cover off. Okay, voila. I know it really shouldn't be a big deal, right? Just lights, but finally, we got some lights. Take a look. Yahoo! Now let's get these heat shrunk. These connectors heat shrunk. Let's get them pushed up in there, and let's get them mounted to the ceiling. Let's get some real light going on in here. And with that, it's now time to go ahead and get these lights installed in the ceiling. And I went ahead and chose some really small little screws, some small drilling screws that were really made for like fiberglass. And I didn't need very long because the fiberglass is very thin. So I just needed to go in the fiberglass. The foam really has no structural strength. So tiny little screws just simply to hold these in there. And yes, what a dramatic improvement, an awesome improvement, getting those blue stripes off the ceiling, getting these lights installed. It's so much better working in the camper now, and also getting these holiday lights out of there. So here's a little more about the lights that I actually purchased, and you can get these in different colors as well, which is really nice. They're actually very flush to the ceiling, which is one thing I really liked about them, and very easy to install. or at least fairly easy to install. As you can see, there's obviously a lot of challenges just pulling the wire through all the wire chases and so forth. But overall, pretty easy to make this all happen other than just a little tedious process. One of the best improvements one can make right away to your camper build is to actually get electricity going with your camper build, and that means lights. It's real electricity. You can test everything out. As you get stuff installed, you make sure and test it out, but it really makes the most want to use lights because look how dark it is in here. Let's get the holiday lights going. You can see it's still pretty darn dim. It's hard to see down in the bowels down here, but now that I get my ceiling lights on, boom, look at that. Whoop, I even have one of them disconnected right now. But you can see that is a lot of light that it brings on board. It's excellent. Really helps you work down in here. Ta-da! What an improvement, right? It's awesome. It's coming together step by step. And here you can see a little before without the lights on and after with those lights on. So fantastic. A lot of progress happening on this DIY Expedition Camper HVAC system, the air conditioning system, the dishwasher, the sink, the countertops, all that's getting installed. And very soon here, we're going to start seeing cabinetry all being covered up. So it's going to really transform very quickly. So please stay tuned, subscribe, and I look forward to sharing more with you shortly.